All right, hi everyone and welcome. This is our May monthly meeting for the Arizona Association of Environmental Professionals. This is our first time that we are having a virtual meeting over Zoom. And we are so happy that so many of you have joined us today. We have, like I said, we have about 32 participants on the call and about 50 RSVPs. So we are recording the presentation in case anybody missed it who'd like to join in and hear more from Eleanor. So again, you guys have the Zoom information and our meeting password. So again, my name is Eileen Baden. I'm the president of AZAEP through the end of July. So if you guys could just enter into the chat box what your name is, your title, the organization you work for, and your main area of work. So we were just trying to get an idea of who's on the call with us today. So we have Nick Brazier from Logan Simpson, environmental planner, Stacy Campbell, biologist with SWCA, Jerome Hesse with SWCA, cultural resource specialist, Donna Mori with SWCA, environmental project manager with planner focus on mining, India Hesse with SWCA as well, Andrea Love, environmental quality specialist, City of Phoenix, and Eleanor Gladding, our speaker, she's a senior biologist with SWCA, Kristen Molster, Del Sol Group, Tice Saplee with Audubon, Arizona. And Tice, we loved your presentation last year, so thank you so much for joining us today. Abby Barinholtz with Yellowbird, company outreach manager, Tracy McCarthy, Marinella with Papakanomi with environmental planner with McDOT, and you guys can see the list there. So really a great group that we have with us today. So happy you guys are here. A couple folks from ACS, Marie Bear, environmental engineering and planning student at ASU, and welcome Marie. Marie's going to be assisting AZAEP as an intern this summer, just helping us with some NAEP conference planning activities. So I'll get to that soon. So for now, AZAEP is planning to hold the meetings virtually until we hear further, but for now we'll hold them virtually. Our current AZAEP membership, we have around 195 regular members, 30 student members, and 14 corporate members. Our corporate membership is $150 yearly, and an unlimited number of employees can come to meetings for the member rate, free attendance at webinars, and your company can have free job postings. Our corporate members are listed here. And I actually just want to jump to our website really quick. So in case you guys aren't too familiar with our website, in case you're not already, or if you know of anybody else who might be interested, they can just join our listserv from the homepage. Just type in your information here, we'll get you signed up. So who we are, we just have a little bit about our organization, our mission goals, what we were formed to do, which is essentially to help, share information relating to protecting the environment. And so we have a lot of folks in our group, natural resource specialists, environmental planners, archaeologists, biologists, and our topics change from month to month. So we have a little bit about our board members on here. And this will be updated after a few months. So we have our committees. Our corporate members are also listed here. So if your organization is interested and they're wondering who else is a corporate member, feel free to check out our website. And if you ever need to mail us anything, our PO box is on here as well under the contact us. So a little bit about what we do. In case you're new to AZAEP, you can see some of our past yearly highlights. And this will include the topics and the speakers that we had for our monthly meetings. Job postings are on here. So if you have any job postings, corporate members can post them for free. So can government and non-profit organizations. It's just private organizations that we tend to charge a $75 fee for posting a job, and then we'll share it through the listserv. But really for that price, I'd recommend just being a corporate member. We also have our Amy Edwards Memorial Scholarship. We raised over $15,000 last year. So we really want to thank everybody who donated. The scholarship was created in name of Amy Edwards, and we actually we delivered our first scholarship award this past February. In Phoenix. I went to a really deserving student. He has done a lot to, he was in the Peace Corps, he in Albania, and he started a recycling program at a local school that actually spread to the whole town, which is really cool. So he did some great stuff. Check out the LinkedIn post I made in our AZAEP LinkedIn group if you'd like to learn more about why he was selected for the scholarship. And for now, it's going to be going on for at least 2 more years. But if you or your organization would like to donate for the Amy Edwards Memorial Scholarship, we would, obviously appreciate that. You can send a check to our PO box right now, and we're going to keep trying to continue on with this scholarship in the future. So also, if you'd like to become a member, there's a little bit more about the benefits and the dues, code of ethics, and the membership application is brand new. We have a membership application form. So you can just click on that, and it's a Google form. There's just a little bit here about why we were formed, what we do, membership benefits, which membership choice you might want to choose. And then the form's pretty self-explanatory. But if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us at azaep@azaep.org. So we have our membership form, and then just a gallery, just a couple. We are working on getting some more photos up here, but last spring, AZAEP was involved with AZAPA, the Planning Association, and we had quite a few environmental planners that joined as mentors, and it was really, really great to get a mix of not just urban planners mentoring students, but also some environmental planners. So huge shout out to everybody who mentored in that program. And then sometimes we'll just post our January monthly meeting photos, but we definitely post more photos on LinkedIn. So if you guys aren't on our LinkedIn page, definitely join us. It's, you can just find us. It's actually under, give me one second. We have a group. And it's just, actually, if you just look up AZAEP, you should be able to find us here. We have over 189 members on LinkedIn, and we tend to just post some announcements, photos from meetings, things to know about. So definitely join us if you're not on there yet. And then we also have under events, this is where we'll have our upcoming events. So we have our board nominations coming up soon, so that's on here, as well as our monthly meeting June 23rd will be Adam Milner from the National Park Service, and he's a community planner with the National Park Service. And if you haven't heard him speak before, he's really fantastic. So he's the community planner for the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. And we're looking forward to hearing about some of the different projects that the National Park Service is working on. July, our meeting is tentative. We're planning with Haley Paul with Audubon Society, talking about the economic impact of Arizona's rivers, lakes, and streams. So the best way to keep in touch about our notifications is just to join our listserv. That's the easiest way that we tend to communicate with our members most often. So student memberships are free if you know any students who are interested in joining. Again, the webinar today is free. If you'd like to make a donation to our scholarship fund, this is just the address if you'd like to make any donations. So something big we have going on is we're holding elections for president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. So the 4 officer terms end on June 30th. So we're seeking nominations right now, and definitely self-nominations are accepted. I actually encourage them. So please, if you're interested, consider nominating yourself to serve as one of those positions. The term would be from July 2020 to June 2022. You will need to become an AZAEP member as well as a member of the National Association of Environmental Professionals, NAEP, which is our parent chapter. So nominations are being accepted through Friday, June 5th. Definitely a great way to meet people, to network, to really give back to a great organization. Here's, if you click on the nomination form, you can see that this just has some of the details of when you want to apply, and then you'll see there's the actual description for president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and then you can just fill out the information below. So definitely encourage you guys running for a position if you're interested. And so applications until June 5th, so that's next Friday. We also have the National Association of Environmental Professionals. The annual conference is going to be held in May 2021 in Phoenix. So we're really excited about this. Mike Dawson, the past president, is serving as the conference chair. So if you'd like to join with some of the conference planning, join the conference planning committee, go ahead and email Mike Dawson. Also, if you have any ideas for speakers or topics, please email Mike as well. So we talked a little bit about upcoming meetings. So they're going to be held over Zoom for now. June, we have Adam Milner with the Park Service. July, we're planning on Haley Paul with Audubon Society. August is the annual AZAEP board planning meeting. So there'll be no monthly meeting that month. Well, without further ado, I'll go ahead and let Eleanor Gladding get started here. She's going to be talking about the new Arizona Department of Agriculture Noxious Weed Rules.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Alrighty. Okay, so that should work. So thanks everybody for joining today. This presentation kind of came about by one of the last meetings that I attended of AZAEP. I've been a member off and on over the years and attending meetings, and there was a presentation about riparian restoration, and I noticed in one of the photos there was a species that I'm familiar with that's a riparian invader called a rundo. And I was asking, you know, hey, is that a rundo showing up in your area? And it sparked a discussion that a lot of people didn't know a lot about noxious weeds. And so as I went through trying to plan, you know, when I would give a presentation on noxious weeds, in the meantime, the Arizona Department of Agriculture updated their new noxious weed rules. So that's kind of where this whole presentation came from. And it's a subject that I've been dealing with throughout my 20-year career. When SWCA hired me 20 years ago, I was hired as a temporary biologist for a particular project where Maricopa DOT, you know, back 20 years ago, the Phoenix area was expanding, and a lot of the rural dirt roads were needing to be either maintained more regularly, or they were considering paving them. So I jumped in and created a noxious weed guide, studied that, and began doing surveys. So I have been involved in this particular realm for 20 years of my career. So for today, you know, given the organization and the kind of people that are joining these things, I wanted to make sure that, you know, I covered different information for all aspects, that not only for, you know, those people just beginning in their career or students, but maybe you've heard of noxious weeds, but don't really know a lot about it. But then there's likely several of you on the call that know quite a bit about this information. So I'm really hoping that I cover some information today that helps you further your understanding of noxious weeds. So for the objectives, I wanted to not only talk about the new noxious weed regulation changes, but also some things like terms that are related to weeds that can be quite confusing. They overlap and they can be conflicting. There are quite a few different noxious and invasive species lists. We'll of course talk about the ADA update, and then some more general information, tools and resources. There's even a slide towards the end where I just provide links to different things online. And then I also wanted to talk about, how you can get involved depending on what level you're at currently. There's still something that each and every one of you can do with this information. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about some of the roles that I have as an environmental consultant in invasive species management. So terms. So I have found these to be interchangeable and confusing sometimes, but there's three main terms, and there's more than this than even I put on here, I'm sure. But there's three different realms is the way I frame my head around it. You talk about non-native species. They may be, non-indigenous, they're exotic. Sometimes you hear invasive species or pests, and sometimes you hear noxious weeds. So what are those differences? Sometimes they do overlap. You could use them in together and be accurate, but sometimes you just need to use one or the other. So the first one is, just a non-native, exotic, non-indigenous species. It's just something that's not native to that ecosystem. Whereas an invasive species is really pushing a connotation that it has some qualities that it's an invader, outcompetes a native species, or it has some deleterious effects that cause that invasiveness to it. And then there's noxious weeds. Noxious weeds is really meant to signify that there's a regulatory perspective to it, that it's about, it's on a list, whether it's the federal or a state list or an agency list. But it's mostly in terms of the federal and state list, which we will talk both about today. So before we get into the weeds of it, I wanted to make sure that I didn't let you lose sight that invasives can also be other things than plants. Here in Arizona, we have quite a few different types of things. And I'm going to, so just know during the presentation, I'm going to switch back and forth between a couple of things. So I got an email today from the Arizona Game and Fish Department about their Arizona Online tool and about their IMAP invasives. And their recent observation photos I thought was very telling in terms of what are invasives to Arizona. You not only have things like the Eurasian collared dove or the European starling or a red-eared slider to a mollusk to a salamander. The mollusks that I'm mentioning are in the waterways. Then you have some of, like, I don't see bullfrog on here, or oh, here it is. Bullfrog is one, and crayfish. So don't get lost in this, the fact that invasives are not just about plants, even though that's the main subject of my talk today. As I noted, that there's, even non-native fish that, in terms of non-native fish and bullfrogs, those kind of things tend to affect a lot of endangered species. And then I wanted to mention that National Invasive Species Awareness Week was May 16th to May 23rd. So we we just missed it. So at least we're getting this presentation in close to the time period. So the federal noxious weed list. So APHIS, which is under USDA, maintains this list. And I included both links because in preparing this presentation, I usually go to this link for the federal invasive species list, and I noticed that they're not just updating their list, they're also adding an addendum list of changes. So be sure when you're looking for a list, you really try to find the most accurate and up-to-date list. And, you know, as I mentioned, there are many different types of lists. I know from working with the Tonto National Forest, they have their own invasive and noxious weed list just for that forest. Or like the BLM, the Yuma Field Office has a specific invasive list for their area. That's to help those land managers focus in on what are the invasives and non-natives that they really need to focus on for their land management area. So for the federal noxious weed list, it includes 3 different types. There are terrestrial, there are parasitic, and there are aquatic noxious weeds. And one of the things that I thought of that I hadn't really considered before making this presentation was, hey, are there any on the federal noxious weed list that are also on the Arizona noxious weed list? And from a quick glance, I found that giant salvinia and Johnson grass are both on the federal and the Arizona lists. So I found that interesting. And this slide, just to be clear, is just a snippet of some of the different ones. There are quite a few on the entire list, but I was just sharing a few of the different categories. But this is definitely one list that any federalized project should consider, because it definitely has effects for that particular project. So for the Arizona Department of Agriculture, the noxious weed rule changes, I've been involved in an organization called the Southwestern Vegetation Management Association. And we've had a committee for the over 10 years or so that has been actively involved in working closely with the ADA in suggesting changes to the list. Part of the initial way the ADA list was working, it was a lot related to agricultural pests, you know, things that threatened crops and things like that. So in the last, I'd say 20 years, I don't think there's really been very many changes. The last one that I really remember was when they added buffalo grass to the species list. So on January 4th, when this change happened, the Southwestern Vegetation Management Association, that committee, all their effort finally paid off, and the rule was updated. And at the top of the slide, I provided the link to the actual code. It's under the Arizona Revised Statutes. So if you want to really dive into that legal, you know, I provided that for you. But the main changes involved were how weeds are classified. We were previously under regulated, restricted, and prohibited. So they changed those classifications. And then they also added and removed different species from that list. So that's some of the different changes that we can go through now. So the new classification system is actually very helpful, and it brings us in line with our neighboring states like California and New Mexico, and I think there's others, but they use this class system instead of, as I mentioned, the regulated, restricted, and prohibited classes. So it helps bring us into the regional Western standard of how we're classifying noxious weeds. And the main distinction between the three classes is really all about their distribution. And the reason that's important is because, you know, if it's a class A and it has limited distribution, then whenever that's found, you want to take action immediately so that it can't get established and start causing issues. Whereas the other classes kind of, you know, it is kind of here, but it's a threat still, so we still need to do something about it. Or class C, where it's it might be already widespread, but it still has some risks. So you want to prioritize some control. But if you have a project and you have 3 class A and 2 class C's, that helps you focus your energy, time, and effort on which species of noxious weeds you should really be focusing your management and control efforts on. So on the Class A list, the species that are in red are the ones that were added. So all these others that were already on the Class A list are still there. And you'll see the one, giant salvinia, that I mentioned that's already on the federal list as well. That's one that has issues it's an aquatic species, and it can really clog waterways, canals, like the Cap Canal. It could block their intakes and things like that. And then some of the others that I've dealt with over the years, African rue or Canada thistle and spotted knapweed. And some of those I've dealt with, but when you see them, you know that this is an isolated occurrence and something should be done pretty quickly. Sweet resin bush is one that has some deleterious effects, but it has maintained somewhat containment. I know of it existing in Cochise County and Yavapai County, I believe, but it can really cause some effects, so it remained on the Class A list. Oops, wrong way. So one of the other new Class A species was wild mustard. And so I wanted to mention that a helpful plants database that I use a lot is the USDA NRCS plants database. And on there you can find, you know, how the nomenclature has changed. It's one of the ways that we standardize our reports, because, you know, common names can change, and then the lumpers and splitters get involved, and Latin names change. So it's a good way to just standardize your reports and say, hey, I'm using the USDA NRCS plants database for the nomenclature. And one of the tools that it has on there, and it's not always up to date, but it's still useful, is they'll have a range map. So it gives you some idea of where that species may have been detected already in Arizona on a county basis. And we'll talk about later some more specific survey and inventory databases for you. So the Class B list had quite a few additions. And one of the ones that I've been very familiar with, two of them, is the mustards, the black mustard and Saharan mustard. Those been known for quite a while, but it was good to see them get on the list. And then some of the other ones that remained are fairly troublesome as well, like camel thorn. If you're not familiar with that species, it's a beast. It can actually, grow through foundations. It's a really tough one. And then Dalmatian toadflax, that one's has a big effect up in northern Arizona. The San Francisco Peaks Weed Management Cooperative has to deal with that one quite a bit. And then one of the ones I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, arundo and Malta star thistle as well. But one of the biggest ones that has just caused everyone to sign the alarm. We all thought, bufflegrass was bad, which it is, don't get me wrong. But stinknet is a terrible, it's also called globe chamomile. And this is part of a flyer that the city of Tucson and Pima County produced. And, I liked the way they put it, that there's nothing nice about this plant except its flowers. Yeah, it has nice, pretty flowers, but it has some really bad things. Especially one of the things that I thought was interesting was people that were controlling it. Some of them are having respiratory issues from controlling it. So you can imagine why it's a threat that the city and the county are concerned about. It has been known in the Phoenix area for a while, and just recently it has started moving down the I-10 corridor. I believe there was one site in Tucson that was known for a while, but this last year it has started to move quite a bit. So this is definitely something that you want to be on the lookout for. If you see it in your yard, it is worth pulling right away, and taking some precautions. Use your mask that you're using for COVID, so in case you have an effect. But if you can't control it by hand pulling right away, the next step is herbicide use. So if you can find it, right away and start controlling it in your yard, that's also helpful to everyone. So be on the lookout for stinknet or globe chamomile for sure. So the other two that I wanted to mention were the arundo, and it's also called giant reed. This one is a problem in riparian areas. I know Sabino Canyon has been fighting it for years, and it is used culturally in down in Mexico as well. So, but it's definitely an invader for our riparian issues, and we all know how much our riparian areas have suffered already. So this one's definitely one to keep in mind. And then the other one is Malta or Maltese star thistle. When I moved into my house in Tucson, I don't know, 13, 14 something years ago, I noticed one little Malta star thistle plant right by my mailbox, and those spines on the seeds and things have, make it easy to spread. I'm sure it came from one neighbor through from the mailman, and I found it in my neighbor's yard and mentioned it to my neighbor, and so they know to look out for it too. So I've had pretty good success of controlling that in my yard. But I've found it out in the wildlands a decent amount of time. So that's one that I'm quite familiar with. A couple of other new Class B species are Russian olive, which is also another riparian invader. And I didn't mention on the slide, but you know, salt cedar's also on the noxious weed list. I mentioned arundo for riparian areas. So there's quite a few riparian invaders that are just wreaking additional havoc on our deminimized riparian ecosystems in Arizona. And another one that I haven't personally encountered is onion weed, but I know Cochise County has been fighting that one for quite a while. And I was on a call recently, and it sounds like they found some down near the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge as well. And again, that's one of the ones that I mentioned that's also on the federal noxious weed list as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. And it's, again, it's one of the, we can talk about these are non-natives and they're invasives and they're noxious and things, but yeah, it may be a nice plant. It just doesn't belong in this particular ecosystem. So Class C, so this is where you'll find buffalo grass that was added. Buffalo grass is definitely a tough one for the Sonoran Desert. It likes to fill in spaces that are normally open, not allowing fires to carry in the Sonoran Desert, and it's filling in those patches. And there's been quite a bit of effort in Pima County over the last at least close to 20 years fighting buffalo grass. So that one is still an ongoing fight. But fountain grass got added, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then Johnson grass, cochea, which I've encountered quite a bit. And puncture vine remained on there. This is where salt cedar is. And puncture vine, I think you might know them as goat heads. It's one of those that they get stuck. The seed heads have these really big spines, and they get stuck in your flip-flop or even in your bike tire. And so that's one of the ones that you probably have seen, even if you didn't know that you about it, and or know that it was on the state noxious weed list. So fountain grass has become a problem because it's sold over the past many years as an ornamental for landscaping. It's a nice grass, it's a bunch grass with a nice pretty seed heads. But there are places that it has become really established. I know up in Fountain Hills, some of the canyons up there have been invaded by that. And tree of heaven is similarly, as I've been talking about, one of the riparian invaders, but it's not always in riparian areas. I've seen them quite a bit around the Tucson area, naturally growing. I'm guessing they were used as landscaping at some point. It does have nice, pretty flowers. I mentioned to one of my neighbors that had a tree of heaven, hey, you know, that's not a native tree. And she said, oh, but I like it so much because it has pretty flowers. And the next thing you know, she had some landscapers come to do some work, and she had them cut it down. I said, well, why did you cut it down? She said, because you told me it wasn't native. So it is always helpful to talk to your neighbors about different things that you know, because some of them might actually care. So then they're in the updated list, they also removed these species. And the main reasons that were given by the Southwestern Veg Committee was mainly that they just don't occur here. and, you know, or there was one found in 1955, or there hasn't been any other documentations, or other reasons were like common purslane. It's very established in Arizona. So it may not be one of the things that people should really be thinking about when dealing with the noxious weed list. And then the daughters were removed because they're all native. You know, again, back to the reasoning of how the ADA list was run in the beginning was more of agricultural pests. And dodder is one of those species that it's parasitic, and it just kind of climbs over and smothers everything. And so if you had that at the edge of an agricultural field, you can imagine how it might take over the crop and destroy that crop. But most of them were removed because they just aren't found here. So in the end, we had new species added, species removed, and a whole new classification system with which to work under. So it's a really good update to the list, and I think it'll work great for people that actually deal in combating noxious weeds. So some additional information I wanted to talk about was some tools for, you know, managing noxious weeds. Some of the things that that you can do is, you know, inventory and mapping. You know, what's the size of your infestation? Where is it? Which species do you have? Then how do you control or manage it? And do you want to create a plan for one species or for all species on how you might implement your project, or how a land management resource officer might go about dealing with the species on their ecosystem lands. Then there are tools called integrated pest management plans and risk assessments. So those are some additional topics that we'll talk about now. So for inventory and mapping, the Arizona Game and Fish Department has, across the US, there is an IMAP invasives for several states, but the Arizona Game and Fish Department started one, I don't know, I'd say within the last 10 years, and it's graduated over to iNaturalist now, so I provided that link, and I want to go show you that as well. So now I can't get to my the Zoom. I can't get to my Zoom links everywhere. All right. Uh-oh. I gotta hide this thing. I can't. Oh, now I can't get to it. I need to know how to minimize. There we go. There we go. Alrighty. Not that one. There we go. So on this is their IMAP invasives, which is combined with iNaturalist. And you can contribute to it. You can find data from it. They have a map. See, this is the overall map. So it's a very useful tool to help you, but again, it's a database, so it's only as good as the information that's being submitted and the contributions they get, and different levels of them checking the data, but it is still useful. And the email I got today from them was about their Arizona Environmental Review Tool, which some of you may use, where you submit a project area and they tell you about special status species or wildlife corridors, but you can also select for IMAP invasives for them to give you information about what may be documented as occurring in or near your particular project. And just recently, I learned of this particular one, and this is from Desert Defenders, and it's particular to stink net. And as you can see, it's kind of covering the Phoenix metro area all the way down. Oh, I guess that one is there. Oh, I thought they had Tucson map too, but maybe they haven't uploaded the Tucson map yet. But for now, I know that we'll continue to, but for now, you can see how widespread it is in Phoenix. So one of the other tools is control and management plans. And this can be directed at a large scale, a small scale, specific species. You know, there's a wide variety of options that you can choose to make a control or a management plan for noxious weed management. And I urge you that there are numerous online resources. Don't think you have to start from scratch. I included an example from Montana State University that has quite a few different publications on control and management plans to help you formulate your particular plan, get ideas, and be able to figure out what's your goals, you know, which species do you want to target, and what's the life of your project, how much area do you want to cover, you know, all those different things. So that can all be wrapped into, you know, you do a survey and inventory, and then you figure out what level of a management plan you may want to develop. And then one of the other tools is integrated pest management plan. And that term, you know, it comes back to the terms I was using of pest. So this covers quite a different number of pests. So it's not just plants. It's more about any organism that poses a risk for a particular area. In 1999, there was an executive order from the president talking about that government agencies and land management agencies should develop these plans to fight noxious weeds. One of the ones that I did was for the National Park Service, for Glen Canyon National Recreation Area and the Rainbow Bridge. And you know, so think about that particular area. You know, it was not only noxious weeds, but it was things like that could be pest or recreationists, from ants to skunks, you know, different things like that, or bacteria. There were a long list of different pests that, and there were different situations within that park, because that's a large park area. So in different areas, there were different pests that they needed to know. So this provides them kind of a little roadmap of how, okay, that we've gotten some complaints about ants in the area. Let's go to our integrated pest management plan. What does it say that we're supposed to do to try to control and minimize this particular pest? So those can be very helpful, and it doesn't have to be for a governmental organization. It could be for a project or a different type of agency as well. Then there are also things called risk assessments. And APHIS uses this to identify, you know, what level of a risk of a particular pest that's already known in the U.S. But it takes a hard look at, you know, what is the real risk of this species being around. Is it to the ecosystem? Is it to humans? Is it to crops? Is it to, you know, any number of different items? So, and for this, there's also quite a bit of different, oops, where's my different resources that, so just on this APHIS page, it has Noxious Weed Program Risk Assessments. It has all these different already prepared risk assessments. So again, I urge you not to start from scratch, look around. And two of the ones that I found on this particular page that I thought were interesting for us was, there's one for Johnson grass. So, you know, if you have Johnson grass, you could come straight to here and read about the risks for Johnson grass and see if those apply to your lands or to your project. And that may help you decide what level in your weed management plan should Johnson grass be applied. And similarly, there's one for arundo as well. And this, you can see they're talking about it in Big Bend and in Texas along the Rio Grande, where it's a problem there. So there's lots of good information out there, but this is, the intent is to try to figure out what is the real risk of this species being here in your project or on your lands, and why can I reach out for funding or more effort and time or whatever the resources you need to your supervisors in order to justify why you should be trying to control arundo. So I wanted to encourage you all to get involved. These are some of the ones that I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's additional ones out there. I mentioned the Southwestern Vegetation Management Association. I have been a member for almost 20 years. I've done 3 stints on the board. I recently finished up secretary. It's a great organization. They have a good conference every November. And the attendees include, you know, a wide variety like this association, but there's land managers that are out there controlling weeds that you can collaborate with. What are they finding success doing? Which different herbicides are working for them? There are researchers at universities and other research organizations creating tools and resources and studying, you know, anywhere from how certain mycorrhiza treatments may control certain noxious weeds, to the herbicide treatments, to just what are the you know, growth properties of this noxious weed, because this isn't something that we've studied here before and it's growing differently than maybe where it originated from. So I encourage you to check out that association, and also the Arizona Native Plant Society. I know that they do a lot of work. They've had some demonstration sites for bufflegrass, and I know they're battling stinknet. So that's also another good resource. And one of the resources that I forgot to mention along with the risk assessments, let me show you that. And all these, like I said, all these links will be in my presentation as well. In terms of risk, this is a thing that was done, I forgot what year, 2005, but it's still useful. And see, AZAEP even contributed to this. What it does is it ranked so species in terms of, you know, what are the impacts to the ecosystem, what are the invasive attributes, and those kind of things. So this is a very good resource for Arizona. It's specific to Arizona, and it can be found on the Southwestern Veg website, which, like I said, I have included a link for. And then one of the other ways you can get involved is there are what's called cooperative weed management areas. And this occurs over the US. The New Mexico, I know, has quite a few active CWMAs, as they're called. And I've been involved in some over the years. The Pima County one has evolved currently into the Sonoran Desert CWMA. And I recently joined their online Zoom meeting. So I've included a link to their website for you to get involved in that organization. If you're in Northern Arizona, the San Francisco Peaks CWMA has been active on and off. I believe they're still currently active. I have not heard anything recently about the Maricopa one, so I'm unsure if that one is active. But I know the Cochise County one has maintained activity over the years as well. And again, like I said, you know, not only getting involved in these organizations, but letting your neighbors know about things. If you have noxious weeds or invasives in your yard or in your neighborhood, and sharing it with other coworkers and colleagues as well. So I really encourage you to get involved. So as an environmental consultant over the last 20 years, as I said, you know, I was hired to do, you know, a survey, an inventory, and I've done several of those. One of the ones I did for the Tonto National Forest back in the day was right after the Rodeo Chetasky fire, where they had to, it was an emergency. They had to bulldoze roads to get access to these lands to control the fire and create helicopter landing pads and things. So we surveyed all those bulldozer roads that they had to put in right away. And luckily we only found bull thistle had come in some areas. So as I showed you some of the mapping tools that people are using, you can do your own through iNaturalist, or you can contribute through IMAP Invasives or iNaturalist, or you could simply just create your own mapping tool as well. There's quite a few options out there now. So that's one of the things that I've done over the years. As I talked about, I've done integrated pest management plans for government agencies. I've done weed management plans. Those can be anywhere from like a private developer for a renewable energy facility to just small weed management plans for a small project because they wanted to eradicate a species that they didn't know was there. And with weed management, I wanted to mention that it can involve, you know, some before construction you start controlling as one of the things you start with. And then once you start construction, there are parameters. And then once you're in operation, what are the parameters that need to be followed to continue that weed management throughout the life of the project. And then one of the other ways, I want to mention with weed management, also a part of that can include restoration. So sometimes if you have a project where you're going to repair, you know, a riparian corridor, and you have invasives there, you might want to incorporate some ecological restoration into your weed management plan for that area, so that you not only are controlling the non-natives, but you're encouraging the natives. So ecological restoration can be a big part of weed management plans that I do. And lastly, the ecosystem impact analyses for projects. So under the National Environmental Policy Act or the Endangered Species Act compliance, I typically write reports where we went out and we looked at what is the current environment of this particular project. And if there are invasives there, then we need to consider that in terms of how that may affect certain species that are protected, or how the ecosystem and the habitat may be affected if the project is implemented. And some of that includes creating mitigation measures, anywhere from standard measures that are used to washing equipment at the construction site before it enters the site, and then on site before it leaves the site, to try to minimize the spread of a noxious weed that may already exist on site, or introducing a new species there, or taking a species there somewhere else, to other things. Creating a weed management plan could be a mitigation measure. So there's a variety of ways that, as an environmental consultant, we deal with noxious weeds. And that's where it came to my attention that it's not only just noxious weeds in some of these analyses, it can be just an invasive. Just because it's not on the noxious weed list doesn't mean that it may not have an effect for a particular project that should be covered in that analysis. And then this slide is, like I said, there's links on some of my slides, and then some of the other things that I covered. I also just provided a laundry list of different links for you to peruse at some point. Like I said, I will provide a PDF to the association for them to share with all attendees. But I tried to include, like, the Southwestern Veg and Arizona Native Plant Society links as well. And that is my presentation. And I really appreciate you all joining me today. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And when you get my presentation, you'll also have my email address, so you can always reach out to me for resources and questions. I'd love to continue to collaborate. I do not know everything about this. I continue to learn every year. It's one of those evolving sciences. And as part of the SWCA Scientific Leadership Program, I continue that education and learn more about noxious weeds and invasives and non-natives all the time. So I really appreciate you joining me today. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to chat with you, or observations or information.
Great, Eleanor, thank you so much. Well, we can start with, if anybody has any questions, putting them in the chat. And I did see that Matthew here wrote that there is a current map that they're using to map stinknet in Tucson. And actually, I just saw this one as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Oh, great.
You guys can take a look at this, because this is one that I saw as well. So this is a crowdsourced website here. And so, like, here's a bunch in Tucson, and it looks like if folks are 100% confident, they have to upload a photo. And then if they're unsure, they can put it in there as well. And you can see they're all over. And so actually, they popped up in my front yard this year, and they are, we had no idea. And we actually went on a bike ride in Tempe and came across a field of it, and my daughter was playing around, and if you don't know, then, how are you supposed to know it's bad? So I know Maricopa County, I think it was maybe Maricopa County Parks and Recreation, I'm not sure, they had planned on doing like a volunteer cleanup, and then it had to be canceled.
All right.
So I'm not sure if this is something Ken would be interested in with some of those educational videos that he's doing. But my question to you guys is this something that we could maybe create a short training video about? And then I've seen these things like challenges that people are doing. My cousin on the East Coast is doing a challenge where everybody's trying to run a certain number of miles and you log your miles, and but it's all remote. So essentially, like, could folks like volunteer cleaning up stink net and count their hours?
Right. That would be a great idea.
And then it's remote, but the question is, like, do the counties, do they feel like, as long as there's an educational component where somebody's getting trained and watching the videos and then signing up for the challenge or something, then with those videos they get the education to know what to pull, so they pull the correct thing, right? Because that's the
Right.
concern I could see from the county, saying like, that's we don't want people out there just pulling anything. And then I like the idea of encouraging folks to continue wearing masks. So this
Right.
could kind of be an activity that people could do over the summer. You could encourage people to bring lots of water and do it early in the morning. But anyways, it would take a lot of coordination, but that was just something I thought of. Do you have any more ideas on something like that?
I don't, but this was the Z map, so that's what I was looking for. I missed that, so I'm glad that someone shared that, because it does have Phoenix and Tucson. But yeah, I think that, like you said, I just thought of the mask thing when stink net's such a problem with respiratory, because I've heard quite a few people say that it affected them. So that would be, an added effect with it. But I would think that as long as there's a training video and, some helpful, I mean, there's really not a lot you can confuse it with. So that's a good one, because, yes, some things can be confused with other things, and that's the risk. But I think that would be a great idea to have a collaborative effort, especially, I mean, because the buffalo grass, and maybe even coordinating with like the buffalo grass groups that go out, and I'm sure they're on hold to a certain degree, but they would have like Boy Scout groups, attend and everything to help pull, and they would get credit for it. So I would think that there should be an easy way to do this so that we all, you know, um, be apart, but still be able to contribute to it as well.
Yeah, so I like that idea. It just, it takes an organization trying to kind of, who's willing to kind of jumpstart that. Tracy McCarthy said that she thinks they've already gone to seed for the year, so cleanups would have to happen next spring or possibly after monsoons.
That's true. Yeah.
So again, but this kind of stuff does take time to develop and
Right.
come up with. So just because a lot of this is very geospatial based, I do want to mention that the Masters of GIS at ASU, because I'm in the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning. I work more so with the urban planning students, but our GIS students in the master's program have to do an internship to graduate. So if there's an organization that's willing to kind of take this on and they need, GIS help or planning help, I'm happy to share it through my networks at ASU, also happy to share it at U of A or NAU. But just trying to think of how we can divide and conquer to help this, because I have seen the spread has been, it seems like it's happening really exponentially.
Yeah, it shocked me. When I started with SWCA, I was in the Phoenix office for 7 years, and then the rest of the time I've been in Tucson. And when I would do projects and I'd go out, I would every now and then see it in the Northwest Valley. And now that I'm in Tucson and I'm the senior biologist, I review almost all of our Arizona biological reports. And I rarely see a report that it is not listed in the species observed. that was, because when I first started noticing biologists were saying that they were seeing it, I was like, are you really sure? Are you really sure? And then by attending the Southwestern Veg meetings, I had already been alerted by people like John Schuring that I see is on here, that, there was one little population in Tucson, but it was expanding exponentially in Phoenix, and we have to be on the alert. And it's basically like, we got on the alert and it's here. It happened that fast. So it really has been quite alarming.
Well, and next year we have our national conference. So I'm just
Yeah.
trying to think of how we can kind of spread the word. If
Mm-hmm.
maybe, so I'm a environmental planner by training. So I do my best, but I'm definitely not a biologist. So but AZAP, I think we're happy to share the word where we can. We're happy to help communicate where we can. Jeff Johnson, our vice president, he's a biologist, so he can help as well with things maybe that I don't quite understand. But maybe as we're promoting the NAP conference, if Maricopa County Parks and Rec or another organization was to help kind of kick off this volunteer challenge, and it would be based probably on hours, then well, we're just happy to share stuff wherever we can as an organization. Also, Anya from the Central Arizona Conservation Alliance said that they're developing one for that's in collaboration with Maricopa County Parks and the McDowell-Sonoran Conservancy. Let's see.
Oh, good.
Show you guys this.
They're developing cooperative weed management.
Yeah, so and Anya, if you're there, if you want to jump in.
Hi, yeah, hi everybody. There's a couple people here that hopefully know this program. So we are working in collaboration, like I wrote, with the county parks and the the McDowell-Sonoran Conservancy, and this actually falls under the Desert Defenders branding program that we're creating. But given the COVID, we've had to stop a lot of our trainings and our surveying hikes. So this is the official map that we're using to map the species that you see they're listed, which are some of our sort of, the main priority species, I guess, some of the more common ones. And so this is a program that we, given the COVID situation and that we were trying to really keep our volunteers safe, so we had to postpone a lot of our activities. And we decided to start the iNaturalist program because that's obviously much easier to use. There was no training involved. So we were still trying to capture data, encouraging people to walk their neighborhoods because we know that that's where StinkNet is also. So we tried a different approach to engage volunteers during this time. But this is the official map that we're currently using to collect point data and polygon data on these invasive species. As you can see, a big portion of the East Valley has been mapped by the amazing volunteers at the Conservancy. We're also working with the White Tank Mountains Conservancy on the West Valley. And so it's really good work that's going on here. We're kind of this has been a couple years, 2 years that we really kind of started this. So we're working with the Sonoran Desert CWMA, and sharing this data and hopefully collaborating further as we move along this process. So we're excited about this and the Desert Defenders program and where it's going.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so eventually once things kind of calm down, we look forward to volunteers and attend trainings and share this program with everybody so we can, continue this program. Monitoring is a big, important piece of invasive species work. So obviously we want to continue this into the future. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I knew there was got to be other things out there, so I'm glad to see this one.
Yeah, and hopefully in a future meeting, we can get the Central Arizona Conservation Alliance to come back. They did a green print, a mapping training on their green print mapping tool recently at ASU. And so hopefully we can do something with them in the future as well to continue spreading information about their organization, about all the great things that they're doing. Were there any other questions? I was going to have Jeff manage the biology related questions here so I don't mess anything up too much. But yeah, if anybody wants to just jump in and ask Eleanor any questions, that's fine as well.
Yeah, I just checked my PDF worked this time, so when we get done here, I'll email you that PDF and you can distribute it because, like I said, there's just a wealth of information out there. Please do not recreate the wheel. Oh, and one thing I did forget to mention is that in Farmington, the University of New Mexico Extension, they normally do a short course, and I believe it's 3 days or 3 or 4 days, and it's a very introductory to high level about identification, about control. It includes a site tour to different infestation areas, and I was surprised at how many different invasives they have in the Farmington area. So I took that a long time ago, but that one is a very good resource for people getting involved. I haven't seen like a notification for it in a while. And then definitely look out for the Southwestern Vegetation Management Association conference. Will either be in November, depending on the pandemic, whether we'll be hosting it virtually or will be in person. It was scheduled to be held in Phoenix this year. We alternate between northern, central, and southern Arizona. So that's also a good resource. And then I mentioned, I think in my bio, that I found, I think it was through Montana University, an online course. And it was it was really good. They gave you this whole booklet with chapters, and it was very well done. And it was about considerations for land managers that were managing, thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. I mean, what are you going to do when you have thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres and you have, 50 different invasives to deal with, So there's lots of good resources. Just keep your eye out, join listservs. And that's kind of the way I've stayed up to date. I don't always have invasive species projects, but I like to stay up to date on the information because it is an ever-evolving science, and that goes right along with me and my love for continued learning every day.
Hey, this is Jeff. I just wanted to jump in. I actually met Eleanor for the first time at that Noxious Weed Short Course in Farmington.
That's right.
Like 15 years ago.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, when was that? How old are we, Jeff?
Yes, old enough, I suppose. I also put a link out there on the chat for it. It's a really awesome course. It's actually set up so you kind of have an introductory course the first year where you learn identification, and then you go back for a second year and they teach you control and stuff that would go into your integrated pest management plans. So just a shout out for that. I also wanted to mention that I saw an article today that said that stink net is also spreading in Southern California right now. So it started to spread there as well.
Wow.
So Tracy mentioned that if you have a neighborhood association, a listserv or Facebook page, to post the information on there as well. I recommend it. I shared it with just some folks at work and with some students because I think it is a pretty plant. Like you see it, and we were more so like, oh my gosh, look at this little yellow circular, globe. I mean, it's like so we just didn't know what it was, and we had no idea it was invasive. So I think that education is huge here. So I agree with what Tracy said. Yeah, if you guys, can share this with your neighborhood groups, Facebook groups, I think getting the word out is one of the most important things that we can do. A short video to kind of let people know what it is and why, what the concern is with it, I think is really, really important. We can help to share that information.
Absolutely.
This is John Shearing here, and I'm just going to jump in for a second. First of all, the SWVMA annual conference in November, we've decided that that's going to be a Zoom conference or something equivalent. and CEUs will be offered. And I was just informed today that the short course up in Farmington this year in July will also be online.
Oh, awesome.
CEU units will be offered. So you can certainly go into those respective websites, and I see that Jeff just sent around a URL for the Farmington conference. The next point on StinkNet is that on both the SWVMA and AZNPS, Arizona Native Plant Society websites, you can find fairly extensive resources on StinkNet, including brochures. Concerning Southern California, that infestation, Jeff, started simultaneously about the first time it was reported in Arizona in the early 90s, late 80s. And yes, it has been exploded, especially in San Diego and Riverside counties in California. And we're working almost daily with those guys over there, passing information back and forth.
Great. I saw your name on here, John, and I was like, I know John will have some good info to add for me. He was one of the Johns on the SWVMA committee that spent a lot of time and effort helping to get these new noxious weed regulations done. So he's contributed quite a bit of his time and effort to noxious weed control and all his little projects. At some point,
yeah, that committee, by the way, was composed of 3 Johns and a Patty.
Yep. I know, and I'm terrible. That's why I made myself not say who they were, because I always forget the other John. I know John Brock and John Shearing, and I forget the other John's name, but I know Patty Fenner.
And John Richardson.
Richardson, yes. That's why I was like, I'm not including it in my presentation. I'm just going to forget it.
Well, we sure appreciate all the hard work that you guys are doing and you coming in today and giving us this presentation. Does anybody else have any other questions or anything else they'd like to add? Not at this time. Oh, we have, let's see. Well, I think that's all we have for today. So our next meeting, our next AZAEP meeting will be over Zoom, and that's going to be on Tuesday, June 23rd out of Milner with the National Park Service. So I want to encourage all you guys to join. I have to say, every AZAEP meeting, I always learn something new. So no matter if maybe the topic wasn't or feel free to join us when there's a topic that's of more interest to you, or if you see a presentation topic that is maybe interesting to folks that you know, please spread the word and share our newsletters with some folks that you work with or people who are interested in some similar topics. Just want to keep expanding our network, our database. I see quite a few names on here that are new to me, so I'm so excited that you guys are here today. Really want to thank Eleanor and give you a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. I see some claps on the screen. So thank you so much, Eleanor. If anybody's interested again for running for a board position, we're accepting nominations for president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer by June 5th. If you have any questions, please email us at azaep@azaep.org. And I'll go ahead and I'll save this recording and I'll get it posted to our website as soon as possible.
One more quick thing, if you would, folks, if you have some time, if you would just send us some feedback about how you think the meeting went. This has given us an opportunity to kind of reconsider how we do business. And, even if we do get back to a point where we can do face-to-face meetings pretty soon, we might want to consider having this be a side option for folks that can't make it to those meetings that would be interested in learning or attending the presentations, but just can't make it to a dinner. And so if you have any feedback about this or those ideas, we would really love to hear that. So please send us that if you would.
Definitely, and if you have any ideas for future topics for presentations, please feel free to send it to us as well. We want to hear what you guys want to learn more about, or if you'd like to be a speaker, please email us as well. We'll send you the form to get you the information that we need. And we're really excited to have our national conference here in Phoenix next May. So we'll be looking back at some past presentations, but also if you know of any phenomenal speakers, they don't necessarily have to be in Arizona either. It is a national conference. So if you have any ideas for speakers for the national conference, or you just want to get involved, please feel free to email us, and we'll work with you the best we can. Well, thanks again, Eleanor. We really appreciate it.
You're
And
very welcome.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Very welcome.
Have a great week.
Yep. Take
Great
care.
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you.